Yep. All right, so let's take a look at that packet you got in front of you. First off, we need to kind of learn what Illustrator is used for. Like I said earlier, we're going to be working with 3 different softwares here in the classroom. We've got Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop we're going to be covering. And the first one here is Illustrator. So what makes Illustrator special compared to some of the other programs that we'll be using? Well, first off, it's the only one that really deals with vectors, or in the creation of vector graphics. So the word vector refers to the type of file we're going to be creating. And if we take a look at that list that's in front of you, it says that it's resolution independent. That means it has no tiny little pixels that make it up. So I guess we kind of got to talk a little bit about a raster first, and then maybe a vector will make more sense to us. If we take a look at Superman down there on the wall, Superman is a highly detailed image. It looks photorealistic if all the colors were printed. Currently, it's being printed in CMYK, so we can see the steps. But if you get close to it, it's going to have all these tiny little squares. Those little squares are called pixels, and when printed at the right resolution and viewed at the right distance, it all blends together to create a nice, seamless photo. So that's raster. That's a raster image. It's got all these tiny little pixels. If we look at the fish that are on the wall over here, those fish were produced using Illustrator. So those are vector-based graphics. So there's these tiny points, and then between those 2 points is going to be a line. Technically, that line is called the Bezier curve, and that is based off of a mathematical format. So I could draw that fish at the size of a quarter if I wanted to, and then blow it up to the size of a billboard, and it's not going to become pixelated because it's based off of this mathematical format that's being used. Kind of long-winded little speech there. We're going to watch a quick video up on the big board. There's some visuals that go with it. It'll hopefully help you maybe understand this a little bit better. So let's kind of take a look at it.
I'm going to talk about the difference between vector and raster files when it comes to digital graphics. You've surely heard these terms before, and you've probably worked with them as well. But you may wonder which format you should use when. And even if you're an old hand with vectors and rasters, you still may be at a loss to explain the difference to other people. So I hope this will clear some things up for users of all levels. So let's get started. A raster image is made up of square pixels arranged in a grid. All digital photographs, for example, are pixel-based raster images. So here I have a photo open in Photoshop, and when I zoom in, you can start to see the individual pixels that make up the image. A vector image, on the other hand, is made up of mathematically described objects such as points, paths, strokes, and fills. Here I have a vector illustration open in Adobe Illustrator, and I can move or alter these objects individually. I can adjust the paths by manipulating the individual points to change the shape of the objects. Vectors have an underlying structure that is made up of these paths and shapes that can be filled or stroked with different colors, gradients, and patterns. So even if I alter the appearance of the object by changing its fill color, or its stroke color, or changing it to a pattern, that underlying structure remains the same. Here's a demonstration that explains the difference in a very basic way. Let's say you want to draw a simple curved line. For a raster image to describe that curve, it would have to use individual pixels, which again are arranged in a grid. A vector, on the other hand, tells the computer to place one point at the beginning of the line, another at the end, then draw the curve between them. The shape and direction of the curved line is described mathematically. So you can see that with something like this, the vector is the most efficient solution. It's kind of like giving someone directions to your house. You don't say, take a step, then take another step, then take another step, then take another step, and so on. You say, start here, walk to the end of the street, and make a right turn. Because vectors are mathematically described, they are resolution independent. This means they don't rely on DPI, or dots per inch, for their quality. A raster image has to have a certain pixel resolution in order to look good. Here's what I mean. I have a logo open in Illustrator. We're viewing it at 100% magnification, and it's a vector file, as you can see by the paths. Now, even if I zoom in to over 500%, you can see that the edges are smooth and crisp. I'll zoom in again to almost 1600%, And again, nice, smooth, sharp edges. Now, I want to pause here and mention something that can be a little hard to grasp. We are, of course, viewing this graphic on a computer screen, and computer screens are made up of pixels. So it can be confusing to think of a non-pixel-based, resolution-independent vector graphic that's being displayed on a screen of pixels. But if you print this vector, whether on a postage stamp or on a billboard, it will still look sharp. Here's that same logo as a raster file in Photoshop. We're viewing it at 100%, but even if I enlarge it to 200%, it starts to look fuzzy. And it looks even worse at higher magnifications because the resolution of the raster is simply not high enough. Computer fonts are another kind of vector file. They too have mathematical information.
All right, we're going to call that good there. So as we take a look around the room, let's try to identify some different types of graphics that were created. We said Superman is a raster-based image, so that was done Photoshop-wise. Other things in here that were printed, the royalty-free images sign, that was a Illustrator document. The fishes were Illustrator. The posters about the software, all Illustrator-based. The door back here, Illustrator-based. So you can kind of pick a theme up between graphics. When you start to look, you can kind of make an educated guess on which program most likely created it based off of the complexity of the artwork is a good judge most times of where the image was created. So we kind of got that piece down a little bit. There is one more bullet there. It does talk about printing, right? So there's two places that a graphic can live. It can live on the internet, or it can live as printed media in our classroom. If it's going to live on the computer only, and it's going to live on the internet, 72 dots per square inch is a really good number. That's what pretty much the standard is for viewing graphics. But if we want to print it, our minimum baseline is going to be 300 to get a decent image. And that means that there's going to be 300 dots per square inch when we print that piece of paper. Our printer will go up to, I think, 1,250, I think this particular one in here does. So that is a lot of little dots being put into a square inch based upon what we know so far. Some of the other stuff that we can kind of talk about real quick is file formats. There's a couple that we'll run into in this class in the next couple of weeks that we need to be aware of. If you're looking at your screen, I'm going to show it to you really quick. I've got a file folder there. It's got an AI file. So whenever you see the file extension in your file folders and it says .ai, that's going to be talking about an Illustrator file. Illustrator files can only be opened in Illustrator if you want to edit it. If you want to take that same file and place it into InDesign or Photoshop, you can take that AI and place it in. Those are the only other two programs that you could place an AI into. If I wanted to take that AI file and open it up in like a PowerPoint that I've created for another class or a handout or something like that, it wouldn't open. It doesn't know how to recognize that information. So what has to be done is it needs to be saved as most likely a .png, which is on your sheet there. It says it's portable network graphic file. That is going to turn it into a raster. So it's going to take what is vector artwork and then save it to a raster. It's going to add pixels to it so that a standard program could open it up for us. Some of the other stuff that we may run across is that .pdf, right? PDFs are something you probably receive all the time in email because it's a super small file that anybody can open. And then you've also got a JPEG. A JPEG is something that your phone will take a picture. When you do that, it saves it as a JPEG. There are a couple problems with the JPEG file. It's highly compressed. So as you save the file, it's going to take it and throw little bits away. So if I have a piece of paper, let me grab one really quick. We'll use a syllabus as our example. If this is my file that I'm working on in Illustrator, and I want to go ahead and save this as an AI file, it's just going to take it, it's going to fold it up. We're going to pretend this is how files are saved. It gets all folded up and it neatly shoves it into your pocket. It's nice, flat, everything's good. When I go to open it back up, all my information is still going to be there in vector format. But if I go to save this as a JPEG, it's going to take it and be like, oh, we need to make this smaller. It's not quite small enough. I got to compress it. And what it does is it looks for like colors and it throws those out to try to keep on compressing the file. And next thing you know, you've you've got it, and it's nice and small, and it kind of crunkles it up a little bit, but you have to go print this or open it up at some point to its full resolution, and you go back and take a look at it, and eventually, once it opens up all the way, if it will even get there, parts of the actual original image are missing because they've been thrown away. When it compresses, it's gone forever. And the more times you save it, the more compression is going to take place and the more you're going to lose, and then you end up with data loss over time. So this would be considered a lossy type file. Every time it's going to lose it. And then there's also considered lossless, which is the AI files. So a little digression on file types, but just, know the difference, know the extensions when we're looking for stuff. Generally, I do tell you what to look for, whether or not it's an AI, JPEG, or a PDF when we are doing things. So I'll give your computer back to you. We're going to jump into Illustrator now. So here in the program, we have what are called preferences. Preferences are something that can be set before we create our document. There are a few that need to be changed before we actually start anything so that we can be successful. In my opinion, these should be kind of set by default, but they're not. So on your computer, go ahead and push Control-K. Control is a modifier key that is used to do a shortcut command on our computer. So if you don't know how to do that, down on the keyboard it says CTRL. You're going to hold that key and press whatever I tell you to, and that will give us a shortcut option. So what it's done is brought up our preferences box. If you go to the second sheet on the second page on your packet, you'll see a little snapshot of the preferences box. It's got 3 arrows that kind of are on there. And how I've got the notes set up is I put arrows to where certain things should go. I've put arrows to certain parts of the diagrams. And you can write notes if you would like. I mean, I'm not going to get in here and tell you have to do it. But there are, it's up to you. You guys are big kids. You can figure it out. Number 3, that little arrow there, is probably the most important thing to note if you're taking notes there. Number 3 is pointing to where it says scale corners and scale strokes and effects. Currently, they're unchecked on your computer. So what does this actually mean? Well, let's take a quick look. I'm going to take your computer over, show you the difference between the two and how they definitely affect the overall function of your document. So I'm going to take your computer back real quick. I'm going to create a blank document. So if I come in here and I create a shape, and this shape is going to have a color with it, blue, just give it a nice fat stroke really quick. Control-K. So by default, I've got these turned off, right? That's what the program tells me to do. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to shrink this guy up. It kept my stroke at 6 pt. So if I come back in and I turn scale, strokes, and effects on, and I make this bigger now, you'll notice that my stroke is 26. So what it does is it keeps everything proportional. So if I scale up or scale down, it's going to adjust the thickness of that stroke because I've got the scaling on with it. But if I don't have that turned on, right, I come back in here, I turn those 2 off now, and I scale this back down. It kept 26, but you see how it choked the inside of my box. So Mrs. V and I, like to have those turned on for you guys. We want to make sure we check those 2 boxes and turn them on. So I'll give your computer back to you. Go ahead and turn those on for me. The next thing that we do, if you're working down the list on the left where it says General, we're going to go down to where it says Units. Units will bring up a part of our preferences box. Yesterday, you were asked to change your document from points and picas to inches. All right, so there's lots of different ways you can do this. I know of at least maybe 4 or 5 ways that this could potentially be done, but this is one of them. All right, the only thing you would change in this particular spot is where it says general in the middle of the screen. It currently says points. You would probably change that to say inches if you want to set your units and increments this way. Points and picas is a common measurement. It's used only in the graphics industry, more specifically in like the advertising and printing world. It's kind of like the metric system. It's actually not that hard to use, but we're not going to get into it in this particular class, so we're just going to leave it as inches. Guides and the next one, guides and grids. Here, guides and grids are there to help us. They will never print, right? So when you go to print, they just won't show up. But they are there to help us during the layout process of our design. Sometimes you may need to change the color of your guide based off of what your design is. If you're doing something that's blue, you probably don't want to have a blue guideline because it'll be difficult to distinguish between the guide and the artwork that you're doing. And then it comes down to grid as well. So right now the ruler, the 1-inch ruler, is being broken into 8 pieces. But if I want to have something a little more complex, you could. So let me bring up a new document really quick and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I'm in here and I turn on my guides and grids, I go to view, show grid. If I zoom in, you can see that there's 8 lines between the darker lines. If I did Control K when my document is up, I go to guides and grids. I can change this. Maybe I say 16. I got a lot more boxes in there. So this will allow me to help with my design. And the way that it works is if I'm drawing, they will snap, if I have snaps turned on, to the intersecting points. I don't know if I've got snaps turned on right now or not. Snap to grid. So now it's on. So you can see how this would be a little bit easier to create stuff, but it also can be very annoying if you want to hit in between a box. So that's what guides and grids will do for us. Let's get back into our preferences really quick. I'll give it back to you so you can see what's going on in your own. Go down to user interface. That's the last one we want to touch on. Currently, user interface is there's a spot where it says brightness, right? It's going to be set on the second from the left, but you can set your own. You notice that my screen is very light in color. It's easier for you guys to see on the board, but you can pick which one you like the best. So go ahead and choose that. That is a lot of clicking. I'm going to stop that right now. So the other thing that you could do in here, if you are vision impaired or you just want to see things at a larger scale, where it says UI scaling, you can change that and it will increase the size of the tools for you, so maybe you don't have to squint as much. We all spend so much time on our phones and other devices that eventually, who knows what it's doing to our eyes and everything else. So if this helps you, you can get in there and increase the size of those so that it's a little bit easier to see as you sit back from the screen. So, yes. Are you colorblind? So that's a good valid point right now. Most males, or one in 3 males, have some sort of color deficiency. If you didn't know that, are you blue or green? Do you know? Red and green? Yeah. So it's a common thing. Actually, it's not that bad. There is no colorblind setting that I know of to like adjust stuff. You kind of just, I don't know what to tell you, man. Yeah. You've probably figured out ways to adjust, but when you wear the wrong colored socks, we're gonna make fun of you though. Okay. What color is this? We're gonna start playing that game now. All right. So with that being said, that gets us to the preferences box. Everybody, take your computer, click OK. We want to get out of our preferences now. Don't change your user settings right now. It restarts the program. We are going to talk about creating a new document. So everybody go Control N. Control N is a new. This has brought up our new document window. Everybody get it? I think so. I'm going to pull mine up just so I can point to some stuff and show you. My recent documents are full. You guys had nothing in there in your recent documents because every day your computer is reset and you don't have recent documents. Unfortunate, but that's how it is here at school. So what we're going to talk about first is actually these settings right here where it says mobile, web, print, film, video, and art and illustration. You might ask, why are there so many different categories for presets? Well, if we take a look at mobile, how is the dimension of a screen measured? Anybody know? What measure is used? What unit of measure? Yeah. It's pixels, right? So it's going to set up a document that's in pixels for you. So if we take a look over here where the red cursor is, it says pixels. If I go to web, also pixels because web and the phone both are viewed on a screen. So screens are measured in pixels. If I go to print, it jumped over to a point, but point is a graphic unit of measure. So that works for a piece of paper. If I want to change that to inches, I can at this point. If I go to film and video, it goes back to pixels for me. Another big distinction is down here in this area. What does RGB color stand for? Red, green, and blue. Winner. What's our resolution? 72, right? So we're talking about a document that would live on a screen. Let's click on print really quick and see what happens. Print, oh my gosh, now it says it's CMYK. What does CMYK stand for? Black. K stands for black. It's technically called the key color. That's why it's black. But that's a big difference between film, web, all that other stuff. It's the resolution of the raster effects. So if I need to save or output my vector document, it's going to convert back to this advanced options, and it chooses 72. Well, that's not overly great if we want to print it. We want to try to keep everything at a high resolution that could be printed. So a little side note real quick about what RGB is and what CMYK is. Those are the two types of color models that we have in the world, right? So people see color either via additive color theory or subtractive color theory. Additive color theory is anything that produces a light is going to be considered additive. So your computer monitor, the projector, your phone, they all have RGB lights inside of them. So our monitor that we're looking at in front of us, it's LED, so it's got a bunch of these tiny little diodes inside of it, and they're turning on and turning off and creating our color for us. It's producing a light. Subtractive color theory is CMYK. So anytime you print a piece of paper in color, whether it's at your house or on the big printer on the other side of the room, it is using 4 colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, to produce what is a full color image. And that's called subtractive color theory. That works by light hitting the paper and then coming back at us. It bounces back at us. So I could go much deeper into this, but I'm going to stop there because you don't need to know what I'm going to say next. So we got additive and subtractive color theory. Those are our two pieces that are out there. I think that should get us through. So in here in this class, we're generally designing for both medias. So the big difference between RGB and CMYK is the amount of available color. RGB, when those 3 colors are mixed, can produce brighter, more intense color than RGB can, or than CMYK can. It's a smaller little cone of color. So if you know your document's only ever going to live on the internet, you might as well go ahead and choose RGB because you'll have more bright, vibrant colors to pick from. But if you're creating a document for both online and offline and your client wants to be consistent with color matching, you should pick the smaller color space and work with only those colors so that everything kind of matches from one medium to the next. That's a little long, drawn-out speech about color. That's what I teach. So, alrighty. We'll move on to the next setting here really quick. where it says preset right there. So I always like to tell people to go in and just click print to start with. And then I like to go ahead and also assign a name right away, okay? A lot of us get in a habit of just clicking OK and not putting a file name in there. This is where we get in trouble, because if our computer crashes or we forget to save, it's going to save it as that. So if we give it a name like day one, what is this hour? Sixth hour, and there we go, sixth hour. So that's my file name. That's what it would save as right now. We're going to make this inches, and we're going to call it a 10 by 10 document, so I can go in and type. What is my orientation of this document, portrait or landscape? It's neither, because it's both the same width and height, right? If it's portrait, it's got to be taller than it is wider, and if it's landscape, it's got to be wider than it is taller. It was a tricky question. Portrait, landscape. Yep. So there we go. We're not going to talk about bleeds. We're going to leave our color alone. We click create. You'll notice that by typing in there, I now have a file name up here. And I can go ahead, and if I click save, I could navigate to my Google Drive, because that's where we want to save everything. I would click in my drive and find the correct folder. It's already loaded up right there, so I don't have to type it again, and I'd click save. So with that being said, I'm going to give your computer back to you. I want you to create me a print preset document that is 10 inches by 10 inches and label it day one practice. Oh my God, you made a film one instead of a print one. It's okay. We'll get you squared away here in just a second. So our next step is to turn the page over, and you're going to see a picture of a toolbar or a toolbox. We're going to spend a few minutes filling this out. In order to be successful, you need to be in what is called the right workspace. So if you follow my cursor on the red dot, we're going to go up, and by default, you're going to be in Essentials, right? So the Essentials, this little drop-down box piece here is called Workspace Switcher. Our computer has been preloaded with several different type of workspaces. These workspaces allow for icons and panels that are related to that type of work. I like to work in Essentials Classic, so that's what we're going to work in. So we click on Essentials Classic. It changes our view for us. If for some reason, oops, I lost my toolbox, where did it go? There is an easy way to reset it. You just go back to the drop-down box, go out onto the bottom of the list where it says Reset, and it will reset that workspace back to the default that was established by the program. We are going to go through, and we are going to label all of the tools. The way that I just pulled it off the side there is I grabbed the little gray area right there, and now I can move it where I want it to go. If I hold or hover my cursor over top of a tool, it will tell me the name. We do not need to write tool or the shortcut letter. We can just write the word selection for the black arrow. The white arrow is going to be deselection. So you don't have to write all the stuff you see there. We're going to go all the way through the toolbox, but we're not going to do the little window or graphic that I have in the upper right-hand corner. We'll talk about that once we're done. When you finish, I just would like you to go to the upper right-hand corner and push minimize and minimize your windows so that I know you are done with the activity and I can move on. Any questions about what we're doing? All right, good luck. You got a few minutes to work on that.